And over the next 6 months, my sister passed from cancer, my parents divorced, my boyfriend cheated on me, and then my dog died. And the thing that kept me going through all of that was this tiny little business that I had employees. They were relying on me, but I had clients. They were relying on me. I couldn't fall apart. I did end up falling apart anyway, but I tried to hold on as long as I could. And then I eventually...
There you go. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem.
I see you do something different to most of the people that I have on here, because normally it's more on the spiritual side of things. But I speak to spiritual warriors, and I just love the fact that you help to empower women specifically to have wealth. So I'm just going to hand over to you, and you can just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nicole Nadler. I am a licensed financial advisor in the state of Kansas and Missouri. In 2020, I started a money blog called Fierce Feminine Finance. And last year we hit our first $100,000 year for 2023. So it's been going well. And the whole reason I started this business is actually because I've been a business owner my whole life. I started my first side hustle when I was 14, and then when I was 18, my younger sister was diagnosed with cancer. And my first thought was, I need to not be a burden to my parents. So I moved out on my own, turned that little side hustle into a full-time business. And over the next 6 months, my sister passed from cancer, my parents divorced, my boyfriend cheated on me, and then my dog died. And the thing that kept me going through all of that was this tiny little business that I had employees. They were relying on me, but I had clients. They were relying on me. I couldn't fall apart. I did end up falling apart anyway, but I tried to hold on as long as I could. And then I eventually ended up selling that business. And because of the sale of that business, I was able to travel the world for about nearly 10 years off the sale of that business, living very cheaply. And that's where my own personal spiritual journey began, was trying to recover from what I had experienced at such a young age.
Wow. Sorry to hear all of that. That's very hectic.
Thank you. Yeah, so go ahead.
No, I was going to say, your parents, did that divorce happen because of your sister?
Yeah, it's a hard thing, I'm sure, to lose a child. I can't even imagine. I don't blame them at all, although, of course, at the time, I was very angry.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So you traveled for 10 years off the sale of the business. That's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I was living very cheaply, right? I was in my 20s. I was staying in hostels. I was backpacking. I did a lot of volunteer work. I ended up connecting up with multiple different nonprofit organizations and volunteering my time for a lot of that. And I really found that giving back was a way to refill that cup that had been so drained during that year. It really did bring me back to life, to give, and to have the time to devote to other people who, being for the first time an American for the first time in third world countries, I really saw that my story was mild compared to the tragedies that a lot of people in the world experience every single day in war zones, in just regular third world countries in the middle of cities, So I was really blessed in that way to be able to see, at that time when I needed to know it the most, that despite how horrible my life had become, I was very, very lucky compared to most people I connected with during that time.
Do you think that your healing had something to do with seeing how the other people are living? It's almost like we all suffer together.
Yeah, I think that the healing process is unique and different for everyone. A lot of people say that time heals all wounds, and 2 years later, I still did not feel healed. I was having nightmares. I could barely sleep. I sometimes just went days without eating because I was so depressed, and it wasn't time didn't do anything for me. No offense to time, but it wasn't the cure. It was when I started to work with a professional Dianetic counselor and get under the symptoms I was feeling to the root cause of why that trauma wouldn't heal on its own. That's when I started to heal. And then after that, as I continued the spiritual journey, like I said, I discovered that giving back was filling that hole. But all the giving back in the world would not have filled that hole, I don't think, if I hadn't first worked with a professional, because that there were unhandled traumas underlying everything that needed to actually be addressed. So once we got that out of the way, yes, I still had this gaping hole in my life. I didn't have a home to return to. My house had been sold, my parents were off doing their own thing, and they didn't have room for me. So, my sister was gone, my boyfriend was gone, my dog was gone, like everything was gone. And so refilling that with the joy of giving back, that was the part that allowed me to finish healing, if that makes sense. But there did have to be first a very spiritual and personal journey for me of overcoming all of that. And because of that experience and what I went through, I'm very passionate about mindset coaching for my clients. I mean, we talk about money coaching being so different and unique than being a typical spiritual warrior, I suppose. But in my mind, there's really very little difference. You can't survive on this planet without money. And the main reason most people don't have money is because of their mindset and their unhealed trauma on the subject. Being taught things like, money is the root of all evil, and being taught that rich people are evil, and like all of that, and our own trauma of being told like it's rude to ask someone how much they make when you're a child, right? Like all of that adds up to people not being able to earn enough to live comfortably. So I see a very strong connection between what I went through and what I'm able to do today for my clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything has got, it's systemic, right? Everything affects everything else. You cannot,
Totally.
All your beliefs will filter out in some way or another. If somebody believes that they're worthy, they will have the money. If they don't, they won't. Even if they get it, they'll spend it.
Back. Yeah, I see that a lot where women earn money and then they blow it all because they can't, there's something inside them that's stopping them from being able to accumulate it, right?
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you started at 14 already. Do you think, two questions. First of all, that's an entrepreneurial spirit. That's somebody, I think it's just inside people. I mean, I've also been working from a young age. I just always wanted to have my own money. I wanted my own independence. And I think some people aren't wired that way. My kids certainly aren't wired that way. But do you think you were wired that way as well? Or was it just the other question, which is the burden part?
I think it was a combination, because while I am a second generation entrepreneur, my father owns a successful business and did my whole life. So I did get to see that sort of stark difference between mom, who had a 9-to-5, and dad, who was a business owner. So I saw, the pros and the cons growing up of what that was like. But I also have 5 siblings, 4 now, and none of them are entrepreneurial except me. So I do think that while having entrepreneurial parents and having a business owner parent can certainly help, I do think it's also, you got to be wired for it. Some of us are just crazy entrepreneurial spirits, and that's a personal choice, I think. But at the same time, I say choice, and that's almost a misnomer, because I don't think I ever could have a corporate job. I don't think I would do well in that space. So it's not so much of a choice as like a drive.
I agree. I had a job for about 2 months, and I was fired for being lazy because I was too quick. I was doing too many people's work, that I was actually just sitting around saying, please give me more work. And the boss would come around there saying, you're lazy. But it's the best thing that ever happened.
That's
So, okay,
hilarious.
let's go back. So, you say it's because you felt like a burden on the system. Is that something that you felt from a very young age? Because I always see that with my clients as well, is that you feel like you don't fit into the family. So, rather just take yourself out of the system because nobody really wants you there anyway. Is that is that kind
I've
of what
never
happened?
experienced that. I had a really wonderful upbringing. I mean, my parents were well to do. We had, a nice three-story house and land growing up, and I went to all private schools, and we had the summer homes and the vacations and, all the things. I had dance classes and horseback riding lessons and all the things. Like, I was a total spoiled American princess. The reason I started my side hustle as a child is because my parents were smart enough to know that if they spoiled me too much, I would turn into a total
Okay.
brat. And so even though I had a lot of nice things, when I hit a certain age, they started to reel it back in and say, okay, if you want to continue those dance classes, get a job, right? If you want to go hang out with your friends, earn a car. And so I lived in the mountains in the middle of Colorado, and I really wanted to go spend time with my friends as a teenager, but none of my friends happened to live in my neighborhood. They were like 45-minute drive away. And my parents went, well, get a car. And so I started that side hustle as a way to earn a car. And it took me 2 years to earn that car. And it was a very lonely 2 years because my parents rarely were willing to drive me anywhere. And so by the time I got my car, I was so relieved. And in those 2 years, I was so hungry to earn income so I could have that car that it really did teach me the value of having really good work principles, work ethic. So I'm very grateful for the upbringing I had. But I also think that tragedy struck right as I turned 18, and it did turn me into a completely different person than I might have been otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry about your sister. I
Thank you.
also um, sometimes life happens to us and it's not what happens, but how you deal with it. Is there something that you got from that experience that you could say has changed you in a good way in your life?
I don't even know where to begin. I feel like all of it ended up being like who I am today is someone I'm so grateful for and proud of. And I don't think I would have had that kind of self-confidence if this hadn't happened. I was very shy and bookwormy and very, very introverted. And I really struggled to get my first few clients in that side hustle business because I just couldn't confront talking to people. And now I'm a loud-mouthed, confident businesswoman. And I think that a lot of that was because I had to come through this sort of dark spiritual path to be who I was meant to become, if that makes sense. And I really have learned, if I could say one thing about what that trauma has taught me and what my spiritual journey has taught me, it's that the universe is a mirror, right? You are really looking at you are a spiritual being surrounded by mirrors. And so what you put out is what you get back. And so obviously I didn't put something out that caused that trauma to reflect back to me, but there were parts of my personality that were not healthy. The introversion, the deep tendency towards depression and tendency to think only of myself, right? I was a spoiled American princess. I was very, very selfish. And I think that reflecting that out, right, I think that what I got back was a big slap around of like, you need to wake up. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and a good number of them are suffering in ways you can't even imagine. So stop complaining about you can't find your phone charger, like all these first world problems that I thought I had. And yeah, I wouldn't wish what I experienced on anybody ever, but I think that's kind of the point. I started to think of other people. I started to value other people's happiness far above my own. And for nearly 10 years, like I said, I just volunteered. I gave back. I joined Youth for Human Rights, which is, they work with children who have been human trafficked. And if you think my life sounds bad, I have never had to experience being a 12-year-old girl being sex trafficked, right? Like it really does wake you up. And so now today I am able to treat my life as though it is a mirror and only put out those things that I want to have reflected back at me. And I think that's something that we'll still all work on every day. But I am so much happier with who I became. And I don't think that that would have happened if I hadn't lost Emily and lost, everything I lost that year. So it was a spiritual slap around, but it was needed.
Yeah. And that was her journey too, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just going back, so I know you said time doesn't heal, right? And I know it doesn't heal. That's what people say. And yes, your memory can get a bit fuzzy, but when there is
Yeah.
real trauma, unless you go back and you heal it, you're not going to get past it. It's always, as soon as there's a trigger, you're going to respond to that. But
Yep.
would that tie in the same with money too?
It does. I mean, I could give you so many examples, but just one example, and I can't name names obviously, but a client who had consistently for years, every time she made money, she spent it. Made money, spent it. And she made good money, but she spent all of it. And she's like, oh, I'm not good at budgeting. Oh, like there's all these excuses that we make to justify our unhealthy behavior, but they're excuses that we make because at the bottom of it, we know that there's something wrong with that behavior and we don't understand why we do that, right? I'm sure you can think of examples of things that you do. Like, I don't understand why I do that and it's not really that healthy. And by working with her on this and getting down beneath all of that excuse to the root cause underneath, right? There's childhood or even past childhood,
Yeah.
spiritual reasons why all of those things are happening. And if you can get down to the real root cause of something, you can handle it, right? It's just purely science, honestly, right? A doctor does the same thing. You come in with 10 different symptoms and he could either give you a medicine for every single symptom and solve nothing, right? Or he can get down to the root cause and actually find a true diagnosis and cure it, right? So same thing, we're not curing people, but we are spiritually curing what's actually ailing them. And then after having handled that, a budget becomes not even a big deal. It's just a natural tool. It's just one more tool in your tool belt. But that's what I consistently find is I find clients who I go, here's the tool that would solve that problem. And I watch them fumble it and fumble it and fumble it and find all these excuses why they can't do it. And then I go, okay, we need to do a one-on-one. We need to get in deeper and figure out, why is this happening? Why are you not able to stick to a budget? Why are you, every time you have money that you could invest, you're spending it, you're blowing it, you're going to the mall, right? Like, what is it that you're trying to prevent yourself from doing, right? A lot of people are trying to prevent themselves from doing harm because they had money in the past and they used it harmfully. And so now they're afraid to have money because they're afraid that they'll do harm, right? Or the opposite, they feel like there's so much good they could do in the world that they just keep giving it away, right? And they can't hold on to any for themselves because they don't love themselves enough to treat themselves the way they treat others, which is a funny thing, but it does happen.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is it tied to self-love and self-worth?
Not always, right? And this is where working with a professional is so important. Every single year I do continuing education, both because it's required in the United States for a licensed financial advisor. I do have continuing education, but I figure if I have to do continuing education on investment strategies, why would I not also do continuing education on spiritual, on certified life coach, mentorship, that type of thing. So I've attained several different certifications as a dianeticist, as a life coach, so that I can figure out, because human beings are very unique one to the next. And I can't just blanket tell all my clients that they have self-love problems, right? I have to be able to
No.
see the person in front of me and go, okay, what is stopping you?
Okay, no, obviously you can't say that. But ultimately they would reach that conclusion anyway, I'm sure. If you went back, would you say some of it was also to do with how their parents were with money? Is it learned behavior?
generational trauma is a real thing. It's the trauma that we experience, or just the falsehoods that we are taught. A lot of it comes from misunderstanding biblical principles. People say like, oh, what's a good one I've heard? Like, okay, the love of money is evil is what the Bible says. But people will say the money is the root of all evil. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible actually says that the love of money is evil. And that actually makes total sense if you think about it, because if you love money more than you love the person you're getting the money from, you will be willing to do evil to the person so that you can get the money, right? That actually makes total sense. Like, there's nothing wrong with that biblical principle, but people misquote it. And because they misquote it, then they pass on to their kids this idea that money is evil, right? And then they start to tackle the symbol. Money is just a symbol. It's literally just a piece of paper or a bunch of zeros and ones on a phone, right? And they're attacking the symbol. And so they, out of an attempt to be good, they purposely stay poor, right? They purposely put themselves into poverty in an attempt to be good because they think that the Bible says that money is evil, but it never says that. And if you go back actually in translation, I studied Latin in school. The Latin translation to English is another whole subject, right? But that's one place I see a lot of people get hung up, is their church or their parents or their grandparents or their rich Uncle Lenny has taught them that money is bad. And so now they're trying to not have money instead of avoiding ungodly things to earn money, right? Like, don't do bad things to earn money, and then your money will be good. So that's one place I find a lot of that comes from, in terms of parents passing it on to their kids. But sometimes it's also just hopelessness. Like, if you're a fourth or fifth generation American who's in poverty, and your parents were, and your grandparents were, and your great grandparents were, and then your great great grandparents were slaves, and you've never, your whole life, and you've heard about how your entire family has never escaped poverty, it can be really tough to believe that it's even possible. And I don't know, Natasha, have you ever read Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic book. I love the mindset and the attitude of, first you have to believe, right? If you believe that you can, that's really step zero. Because if you, I'll tell two clients to do the same thing. One of them will go out and do the steps believing it's possible for it to work, and they'll make it happen. The other one will do the same steps, but believing it's impossible for it to happen, and they will make that true just by not believing that it actually could, right? So I think that that's also a lot where the parents to kids things come in, is if you've been taught your whole life that you're never going to escape poverty, you're going to really struggle.
So if you've got a client like that who's been taught that, how would you get them through the process so that they do believe? Or is that totally up to them?
It's definitely not totally up to them. It depends on what level of support they're asking for, to be totally frank. Some of my clients, they have enough of a scarcity mindset that they don't want to pay for one-on-one coaching. And so the best I can do is give them resources, teach them how to overcome that, give them, mindset exercises, and say, hey, why don't you work on this on your own and see how far you can get with that. Most of the time, it's difficult to overcome that on your own. And so what I'll do is I'll encourage them to sign up for a one-on-one with me. I also have experts that I partner with, and I'll send them to them and say, hey, this person needs to be stripped of the false information that they have. And there's a very specific, unique process that they use in order to help you strip away false ideas that you've been taught, that you're maybe clinging on to because you loved the person who told it to you, or you respected the person who told it to you, or the person who told it to you beat you, and now it's been like ingrained in your skin, So we have processes that we can do to help with that. And then sometimes it's just a matter of getting them to spot it, like in conversation, just going, hey, I'm curious, where did that idea come from? And they'll kind of look and they'll go, oh, and then sometimes that's all it takes, is they just recognize that, oh yeah, my Uncle Lenny taught me that, but Uncle Lenny's been a drunkard his whole life, and actually he's in prison now. Maybe I shouldn't follow that principle anymore. So it really depends, person to person, how in depth we have to go.
Well, I actually see it's like a level, even with my clients too. There's always those that can't afford, but the ones that can't afford aren't ready. Because if you really want something, you will find the money for it. It doesn't matter how much you have. People, I've paid for things that I could not afford just because it was important to me. And
Yeah.
and it was worth it. It's whatever you put your value to. So maybe those people are just not ready. So for the ones that are ready, that are willing to say, I want to 10x or improve, what is it that you do exactly with your clients? Is it to help them invest in, just what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, my entire wealth strategy in 2 sentences is one, let's legally and financially protect what you've already got. So we look at the assets they already own, whether it be a home or a car or a business. Most of my clients are entrepreneurial, so they have a business or a side hustle of some kind. So we make sure that all their ducks are in a row, legally and financially, so that all of that is already protected. If they have kids, if they have dependents, we make sure they got life insurance, all those things. Once we have a stable foundation upon which to expand, then we start looking at ways to either increase their income or decrease their expenses so that there is a gap, right, of extra cash every month. And that is what we play with. We go and we spend some of it on fun money because we always want to make sure that we're still living life and enjoying it. And then we spend the rest as an investment in whatever assets that they want to put their money into. I focus with my clients on helping them build cash flowing assets so that they have monthly passive income, because I truly believe that the whole model, the business model of retirement that we know of it in the United States now, of working every day of your life 9 to 5, 5 days a week for a corporation, and then after 45 years retiring, that's really disappearing right now. People are finding that that isn't enough. You have to work until you're 70 or 75, or right, it's like this is this goal that's just getting further and further and further away. So I have found that searching for financial freedom and independent wealth instead of trying to save money and invest it in the stock market and hope that it grows over 45 years, that's a much more attainable target for most entrepreneurs. Is, hey, my make break every month is $5,000 or $10,000. Okay, great. All I need to do is buy 6 real estate properties and I'll have made that every single month in rents, right? Or invest in dividend paying stocks. And, there's all these different strategies that we teach that help you accumulate a portfolio of assets that pay you passively every month. And when you have enough of them, you become just like I was in my 20s, where I had enough money, I didn't need to work, right? And that's the basic principle of what we do.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important if you can preserve what you have first, and I was actually thinking about it the other day, because a lot of people, if something had to happen to them tomorrow, that most of the money would go to tax or lawyers or, to wind up the estate, and the kids would get left with nothing. And that is sad, because people don't know how to, we're not taught that. We're not taught that at school. We can go and figure it out. I mean, you can, if you're interested in learning how to invest, then you need to start reading up about it and learning, but actually take the steps as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I started a blog, because I just found that so many women I talked to were left completely ignorant, and they ended up either relying on a partner who was lucky enough to be financially literate, or being left at risk, right? Like one of my clients early on, when I first started working again, I thought I wanted to be a business coach. I was like, I've owned businesses, I've sold a business, I bet I could be a business coach. So I started business coaching and I actually did really well. I mean, I had clients who were paying $34,000 a year to work with me. But one of my clients, she was about 30, mid-30s, right? Veterinarian, owned her own practice, her own business. And about 8 months into our coaching program, into a 12-month coaching program, I called her office for our coaching call, and I found out she was hospitalized. She'd had a stroke. We found out she had a brain tumor she didn't know about. And I had a front row seat as her practice fell apart because there was no doctor, right? Her family fell apart because there was no life insurance, no health insurance, no retirement plan, no reserves or savings for this business. And I was just like devastated watching all of this fallout, and her family lost their wife, their mom, her employees all lost their job, and her clients, her patients all lost their doctor, right? And I went, wow, I can never let this happen on my watch again. And that was what inspired me to go get my license as a financial advisor and become more educated. And I'm finding, especially here in the US, 9 out of 10 businesswomen do not have proper exit strategy in place. So if something happened to them today, their employees would lose their job. Some of them have life insurance, but they don't have key person insurance, so that income would not go into the business. It would just go to their family. And most life insurance policies take 60 days to pay out after you give them a death certificate. So can your family survive without your income for 60 days? Most can't. Most in the Americas cannot do that. So that's become my mission in life. And I am on a mission to end poverty in the United States by educating women, because we have become 50% of the workforce, but we do not hold 50% of the wealth or 50% of the education about finance.
No, you're right. You're right. I see it a lot because I work with women in toxic relationships, and most of them are there because they can't leave. They've been told to quit their job, become a stay-at-home mom,
Yeah.
and because of the control, and then they get told, I'm paying the bills, you can't leave, and they can't start how do you start after not working for 10 years? You've got no work experience,
Yeah.
the workforce has moved along. And it's terribly hard. But I believe that people should start their own businesses. I always say we've got 2 hands, we've got 2 eyes, we can make a plan. We have a brain, find
Yeah.
something somehow, somewhere, but you need to take responsibility, and you can't outsource that. You might even have married a wealthy man, and then he leaves you and marries somebody else, or something
Right.
happens, and there goes your money.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually 3 domestic abuse shelters here in Kansas City that I work with. And I found the same thing. Statistically, number 1 reason she doesn't leave is because she doesn't have any money, right? Number 2 reason she doesn't leave is because she can't take a pet into one of these shelters. And she's afraid to leave her pet behind in this abusive relationship. And so I think both of those problems would be solved if women had independent wealth. Right? So that's really another very important reason why I think that this, you mentioned being a spiritual warrior. There is a war going on. It is a war between good and evil on this planet. And it's not like all men are evil and all women are good. Believe me, it's 50-50 both ways, right? But at the same time, if you are the victim in that situation, just saying get out does nothing, right? You're just as likely to be abused if you sleep on the street as you are in your own home. So why would you be willing to leave if you don't have the funds to do so, right? And oftentimes, sadly, a lot of those women, they're surrounded by people who are also in a similar situation. Not always, but sometimes they'll ask for help and they get told, well, you should stand by your husband. Where's the support system there?
That's, to me, the secondhand gaslighting.
Yeah, it is. It's 100%. Yeah. So I think that luckily, so I'm releasing a book next month. It's called From Hustler to Investor. And in that book, we share about 20 different ways that a woman can, just with no prior experience, just taking the skills you already have with no, massive savings account or inheritance or anything like that, just taking, finding outside sources of funding, how you can start your own side hustle, start your own business. And in those cases, start one that he doesn't know about, have a separate bank account, have a separate, everything, and just get out of that situation. So I'm really excited about the book we're launching because I think it's going to make a big difference. And sure, you're right, not everybody can afford $1,500 to work with me for a year, right? But pretty much anyone can afford a $4 book. So we're very excited to be launching the book next month.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely share the link down below. So when you work with a client, is it like a coaching that you do, or is it a package like for a
mostly
year?
it's coaching. So we have a membership program, which is just $24 a month. And I use that mostly for women who are struggling to stick to a budget and they just need some accountability and they need some education on how to create a budget you can actually stick to, right? So it helps you earn more in your business and spend less. And that's just a basic $24 a month. It doesn't include one-on-one coaching or anything like that. My coaching starts at $250 an hour, but I do have a group coaching program, which is just $150 a month, and it includes one-on-one coaching as well as 4 group coaching calls. So that's the most affordable coaching way that you can work with me, and I have quite a few women who take me up on that program.
Yeah, I think that's a very good offer, actually.
Thank you.
Because as you said, a lot of women across the board aren't earning as much as the men are. Right. And at the end of the day, you can get busier and scale it up that way. It's just also another niche in the market, I guess.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go back. What was the company that you had before that you sold?
It was called At Ease Home Help. And it was it's a residential cleaning company. I would go first, right? I was 14 years old. I would go to my parents' friends and ask them, hey, do you want me to clean your house? Once I turned 17, I actually started hiring other cleaners and they would do some of the cleaning for me and I did the marketing and the sales. And then when I turned 18 and my whole life was exploding, we really expanded a lot on the business and on the offerings. So one of the key things that we would do is we would come into the home, we would clean the home, and we'd always leave something in the oven. So whether it was, fresh bread or it was a pie or something, and people could select what they wanted to have a home cooked meal when they got home.
Wow, that's very innovative.
Thank you.
But don't you miss that? Do you miss that kind of entrepreneurship? It's different.
I don't really miss it. For one thing, I mean, that was 17 years ago. So, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. It was also a lot of work. I mean, I don't know if you've cleaned all day long, but even when I clean my own home, I'm like exhausted. But this was like home after home after home, day after day after day. I was in really good shape. But sure. I don't really miss that hard labor constantly. And yeah, I mean, even after the trauma was gone and I can look at it, without feeling upset or triggered anymore, I still don't think that I would really want to own another residential cleaning company, especially knowing, I mean, most businesses like that, they have a very small profit margin. Whereas when you build an online business, and I have, 2 online businesses now, online businesses have a vastly greater profit margin than any offline business. So it definitely makes my life easier now. I work less than 20 hours a week most of the time and make a lot more than I ever did in my residential business. So I wouldn't trade it, but I do have some fond memories. I mean, I love baking to this day.
Well, because there's a mindset shift that happens between entrepreneurship and becoming a business owner, where when you're working for yourself versus hiring people and saying, I'm going to scale, but I can't scale if I'm going to be doing the work myself all the time. So pretty much like doing a group program versus the one-on-one. Has there been a shift with the way that women see money lately? Do you see any changes in the way that women working with money, or do you think it's just a shift in general that the whole world is learning to work or see money? I've
definitely noticed since COVID a lot more entrepreneurship amongst women than I saw before that. I think a lot of women had always secretly wanted to, but had a good corporate job and they thought it was secure, right? And then 2020 really taught us that there's no such thing as a secure job. And that the first thing your employer is going to do if they come on hard times is layoffs, right? no matter how good of an employee you've been. And so I think that a lot of women took that as a wake-up call. They already had the siren call of entrepreneurship inside them, but they finally listened. So I'm seeing a lot of that where women are still maybe in corporate, but now they have a side hustle or even two, and they're more interested in entrepreneurship. But as far as the conversation around money, sadly, I haven't seen as much change as I wish I had. You know, when women come through my program, I see a change, but the women who are coming into the program, who are starting their journey for the first time, I'm still hearing the same false beliefs, the same, you know, limiting ideas, and the same fear that I heard 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't think that there's been a big enough shift yet for women to kind of come up to par on the subject of money as most men. I mean, those conversations, they happen behind doors over cigars and drinks. They still do to this day, you know? And so I think it's going to take probably another few decades before women are really stepping up and taking our seat at the table to discuss investments with men the same way men discuss them with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they say that in America, people don't discuss how much they earn, but they'll discuss what they do in the bedroom. Whereas if you're in the East, they're happy to share how much they're earning. It's just open. It's open, but it's a secret what happens in the bedroom. And it's amazing.
I think we got it wrong. I think you guys had it right. Our taboos are much more messed up than yours.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
So tell me, is there still a very big discrepancy between men and women earning in the States?
It's not as large of a gap as it used to be, but it's still a very distinct gap. I see it every day with clients who, you know, you take two employees at the same company and the men are typically earning sometimes as much as 5% more. Sometimes it's way more, like 40% more. And of course, we hear about it on the news, right? We hear about actors and actresses who are both Academy winning, both at the same point in their career, you might say, and the man's making millions more than the female actor was offered for the same or similar role, right? So I do think it's still an issue. I mean, you have to think with the fact that change like that comes from your ability to legislate change into existence, and then your ability to gain popularity to that change, right? That's how it works in the United States. I know other countries do things differently, but we are very much a vote it and then make it popular kind of, that's how change happens. And, 50 or I guess, just about 50 years ago, women couldn't sit for the bar exam. You could not be a female attorney, right? So, and same with people of color, right? So that change is happening, but we've only had a few decades to make it happen. There's also a lot of discrimination, like I said, against people of color. It's not just women. I find a large percentage of my clients are people of color because I am so indiscriminate with my help and I make it so obvious that I won't tolerate racism or sexism in the way that we approach our financial strategies. And so I think that makes people gravitate towards our brand because we're so hey, we're not going to tolerate that. We're going to actually do something about it. We're not going to play the victim and ask people for reparations. We're going to actually go out and make money. And we're going to prove that women-led businesses outperform male-led businesses on a consistent basis, and that's a statistical fact. And we're going to prove it every single day with our investments and with the businesses that we build. So, in my opinion, that's very important. And that's something that we take a strong stance with in Fierce Feminine Finance.
Good. Well done.
Thanks.
So you obviously know Gordon Ramsay. No, not Gordon
Yes.
Ramsay. That's the chef. David Ramsay. Dave Ramsay.
David Ramsey. Oh yeah, I know him too. I don't know him personally.
But is your investment strategy similar to what he does? Because he says peanut butter and jam, and that's what you're going to eat. Peanut butter sandwiches, no going out, no dinners.
I'm actually not a huge fan of a few of the principles that he teaches. I think that the man's very smart. He's obviously built a very great business for himself, and I admire his business acumen, but he doesn't have the same a willingness to vet what he teaches that I would hope to see in someone who is so admired by so many Americans and so many people around the world. He'll sometimes badmouth things that for the particular person he was speaking to was not a good fit, but there are many other people in the world who could have benefited from that strategy and who it would have been a perfect fit for, and he'll generalize his advice in such a way that it makes it seem like that's a bad idea for everybody. And so, yes, he also has this tendency to tell people that, like, if you don't have a, $100,000 saved, then you should never see the inside of a restaurant, and I'm going like, okay, well, I just want to point out that, like, in this lifetime, joy is a big reason why people earn money in the first place. So it's okay to have a fun money account. It's okay to decide that you're going to live a little bit. And so, most financial advisors, they look at your income as sort of a pie, right? If we take a pie, they go, okay, about 25% of that pie is going to go to taxes. About 25% of that pie is probably going towards your debt. So you've got about 50% of your income to live off of. That's most Americans. It's kind of a rough average, right? 50% of what you make actually ends up in your own pocket, able to be spent on rent and mortgage and groceries and things like that. And most advisors will focus on getting you to cut back so that you're living on even less than 50%. Right? So that you can carve out a piece for retirement and for, investing and things like that. My approach is very different than that. I look for ethical, legal ways to cut back your taxes, ethical, legal ways to cut back your debt so that we can carve out a piece over there to invest with, rather than carving it out of your living expenses. I tell my clients to take vacations because taking vacation refills your cup and it makes you willing to go out and work harder and get more things done, right? I tell my clients to go to Starbucks and to reward themselves as much as they hold themselves accountable, right? So I think that Dave Ramsey is a great guy, and I don't think that he's evil or trying to hurt people in any way, but I do think that sometimes he lets his mouth get carried away and he'll generalize, and when you have that large of an audience, there's a responsibility to do what is in your audience's best interests, and some of the things he says are just not. And I can prove it with math and sometimes have to, and that's painful because you never want to badmouth someone who's doing so much good in the world, right? But at the same time, sometimes I'll have a client in front of me and I have to prove to them using a calculator that what Dave Ramsey told them is actually hurting their finances, even though it was a good fit for the guy he was interviewing on the show that day.
Yeah. Now, look, everybody has their way that worked for them. And if somebody wants to learn a way, he'll say, well, that's the way that worked for me. So if you want to learn from me, that's what I'm going to share.
Right.
And I see it with Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you want to get rich, some people say invest in property. Warren Buffett would say invest in stocks. But you can't be good at all things. You can't own properties and own businesses and have stocks and you can't spend all your time diversifying like that. I think, because it takes a lifetime just to learn one thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I have all of those things in my portfolio, and I do believe that you can be multi-passionate, but you have to learn one thing at a time.
Yeah, there you go.
Where I see a lot of people go wrong, particularly women, because we're so used to multitasking in every area of our life, we try to learn real estate and business and stocks all at the same time, rather than building a real estate portfolio and then building a stock portfolio and then building a
Correct.
business, right? Like do them
Yeah. No, that's what I
sequentially,
mean.
not all at once.
But
Yeah.
like I say, if Gordon, I keep saying Gordon, sorry, if Dave Ramsey,
I'm hungry
if
too. I don't know
he,
about you.
yeah, if Dave Ramsey has got his way, which is don't spend your money, build up your emergency fund, make sure you have, X amount of money, have your fund spending, etc. If he, if if that's what he focuses on, you only get to that point at a certain time. You can't
Right.
just to do that, just to build up an emergency fund can take somebody 6 months to a year to 2 years even
Oh,
before you
easily.
can even start looking at doing something else. Don't start looking at investing when you haven't paid off your student loan or whatever.
And that's what's interesting is that's where I'm talking about the math getting in the way. Because if you have, for example, student loans, let's take student loans or a mortgage, right? A mortgage at like 4% interest, student loans at 4 or 5% interest. And you can invest in something that's going to make you 20% interest or even 8%. It doesn't make sense to try to become debt free
Right.
when you could be investing that money, because it's difficult to find a real estate property that isn't going to make you a few $100s a month. And that's way more than you're spending on interest, unless you happen to have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. But most of the clients I've come to, they've got maybe $20,000 in debt outside of their mortgage, and that's high. So if you've only got about $20,000 worth of credit card debt, great, let's balance transfer it onto something that's 0% for a while and go invest in something that will pay off that debt for you. And most people can't think that way. They think like, I'm supposed to be debt free. And so they focus their whole life on paying off their mortgage, and by the time they're ready to invest, it's too late. They don't have enough time between now and retirement to actually build wealth, because compound interest it's a long game, right? It takes time
Yeah.
to do that. So
Yeah.
the other thing I will say though about Dave Ramsey is his advice is meant for the masses. It's meant for the masses, and the masses in the United States are 9 to 5 corporate people,
No,
right?
you're
They
right.
work for
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah.
My entire brand is around business women, entrepreneurial women, female entrepreneurs. They have different needs, unique systems, unique situations that most people never encounter, right? Most of my clients, if they're successful business women earning 7 figures a year, they spent their 20s and 30s building that business. They never invested a dime. So now they're in their 30s or 40s or even 50s, and they have no other assets but the business. So we have to come up with strategies that will work for their unique situation. And that's where I think working with someone like me differs greatly from working with Dave Ramsey, not just because he's trying to talk to employees and I'm trying to talk to business owners, but also because he is not a fiduciary, right? He has no legal obligation to do what's in his audience's best interest. He does have a moral obligation, an ethical one, in my opinion, but he's not legally obligated. I am. With every client that works with me one-on-one, I am legally obligated to do what is in their financial best interest, even if it hurts my own financial interests. And so I can be held to a higher standard, but that also means I have to hold myself to a higher standard and find a situation or find a solution that will work for the person in front of me, and not give blanket advice that might hurt 10 people while it helps one.
Yeah. Well, that's the benefit of being a smaller business versus a bigger business. You can move
Yeah,
faster and you can move with the market as well. Where when you get to
totally.
big corporation, it's slow and it's clunky. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's
So
advantages. I mean, you make plenty of money, but I make enough that I don't need to worry about that, and I don't ever plan to be as large as Dave Ramsey.
no, I agree. I think for myself, I like to be under the radar. I don't just to a point, but doing my own thing. So tell
Sure.
me, if somebody wanted to start with you, where would they find you? How would they get hold of you?
The best place to start is on my blog, fiercefemininefinance.com. You can find resources there to help with pretty much any financial situation you might find yourself in. And that's also the best way to contact me. Just go to the contact page and send me a message. You can also book a one-on-one with me or a member of my team. And I'm on Facebook. I am a millennial. I'm obsessed with social media. So you can send me a DM on Facebook any day of the week and I will probably answer, unless I do take tech-free vacations occasionally, in which case I leave my phone behind. But pretty much any other day of the week, I'm always open to hear from people who want help.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you about?
The only thing I will say is, like I said, I am launching a book next month, and right now I'm offering 50% off on that book. So if you want to pre-order a copy, or if you're listening to this and it's been months and you just have now heard it, I will honor this offer if you mention Natasha's name and remind me that you saw me on this show. I will honor that 50% off code. So feel free to reach out and ask me about it, and I'm sure I'll give Natasha the link, and hopefully you can share that with them as well.
Yeah, well, for sure. That's very generous.
Thank you so much.
I'll post it on my website as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. People need it, even if it's something that they already know, it doesn't harm to reinforce something. And just sometimes it's the way somebody says it that just kind of puts everything together and it makes sense for you, that you get those aha moments.
100%.
Yeah.
So true.
So just one last question. These, the ladies that come to you, is it more needing the financial help, or is it more from the business side of building up their finances? What would you say it is, or is it a mix?
It's kind of a mix. Like I said, I have clients who will fly me out to their business, and I will, get my hands dirty, roll up my sleeves and go, okay, why is this place not profitable? You're earning 7 figures. How is it possible that you're spending more than that? So I do a lot of profit coaching, I would say. Probably about 25 to 30% of my clients come to me for profitability issues. I don't help startups. I'm not I have a business idea and I think I want to start from scratch. I'm not a business coach, right? But if you have a successful business and it's become unprofitable, I can definitely fix that for you. But I would say that 70% of my clients, if not more, are women who have a little bit of extra cash, whether it's $1 or $10,000, $100,000, and they want to put it to work for them. They want to get their money working for them. They want to become confident as investors, and they're looking for someone who can educate them on how to do so, and also sometimes advise them on what to, where to put the money, how to invest it, where to invest it. And so I have a team of licensed advisors, myself included, and we can certainly help with that too.
Lovely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing everything. I do appreciate it.
So thank you very much for having me on the show.
No, you're welcome. Speak soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.